Hello, everybody. Today, we're going to be exploring the world of Avowed. Avowed is the new fantasy RPG developed by Obsidian games, set in the world of the Pillars of Eternity games. I've never actually played the Pillars of Eternity games, but I've played a few hours of Avowed, and I thought it would be nice to take a little walk through its world. Normally I like to take my walks in solitude, but you can't dismiss your companions in this game, so here we have Kai. Kai is a blue fishman sort of thing. He's got scales. And as I said, I haven't played the other games, so I don't know the lore of this world, so I don't really know the names very well. So I don't know what his race is called. Here we have a dwarf called Marius. He is a tracker and a hunter. And we're going to take our little friends here on a walk through Dawnshore, which is the starting area of Avowed once you make it past the tutorial region. And as we walk, we can appreciate the natural beauty of the terrain. And I'll talk a little bit about my thoughts on Avowed. I'm about 10 hours in, I think, and I'll just ramble a bit about the game, the mechanics, the story, the writing, all that sort of stuff. And I'd like this video to have sound, but unfortunately, I don't think it's going to. There's a lovely ambiance in the environment, the crunch of my boots against the dirt, the twittering of birds, the blowing of wind, all those sorts of lovely sounds on a nice little nature walk. These are the walls of Paradise, by the way. A large city here on the coast. And I don't think I'm going to be able to have the sound actually come through in the final product because it's kind of stuttering. I'm getting this weird, I don't know if it's the game or my system or what, but the whole game kind of stutters every once in a while, just a little bit. I don't have the performance settings cranked up or anything like that. But because of that, I think the sound would probably be a bit distracting and unpleasant to hear, so unfortunately we're not going to get that nice ambiance. But I'll see what I can do in editing. There might be a way of, I don't know. That might be a lot of work. We'll see. We'll see what I can do. But anyway, let's get into our walk here. So we're up on this ridge and see a big waterfall off in the distance. That's funny. I kind of wonder how all that water gets up there. hard to see behind those cliffs, but it doesn't look like there's a path that water could be coming from on the same or a higher level where it drains down towards that waterfall. But maybe I'm being nitpicky. So let's make our way down these switchbacks here. And we should have a peaceful walk, unaccosted by the various dangerous inhabitants of this region. I've dealt with them all in advance, so we won't be running into any bandits, spiders, angry bears, zorips, or any other creatures on the road, so you can rest easy. The wilderness has been made safe. And I'll get into my thoughts about the game shortly, which are not entirely positive, but although there are some good things for sure. But before we get into all that, I will appreciate the environmental design. I find it a very pleasant zone to walk around in. Lots of interesting sights. And here we have a relic of a people called the Godless people. And they're called that. They're an ancient people. They're all gone now, as far as I understand. And they're called the Godless because their architecture and their art doesn't depict any gods, which the modern day societies all believe in. Well, not even believe in. I mean, it's a fantasy world where the gods quite literally do exist. And apparently, before the events of this game, a god recently went on a rampage across the world, killing thousands of people in his Titan form. But I find this godless architecture kind of cool. I like its rounded nature, lots of spirals, and the buildings are all kind of shaped like balls or, bulbous growths. It has a very fluid, kind of organic style to it, which I think looks pretty cool. So, up here, we can see a very different kind of ruin. And I believe this is a grunin ruin. The grunin were a race of dwarves, I think. Again, I'm not an expert on this world. I've only played. Everything I know has come from playing Avowed so far. I believe the grunin were a type of dwarf who were great builders, and so there's a lot of their ruins hanging around. I don't know if they're extinct or if they've just been pushed to another area or what the deal is there. But here we have a lovely bridge passing by these great, gorgeous waterfalls. Do you guys have the impulse when you play video games whenever you see a waterfall, to go check behind it to see if there's a hidden cave, a hidden waterfall cave. I do that with every waterfall I see. The percentage of waterfalls in this game that have a cave behind them are, I don't know, maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 9, something like that. It's happened a couple times, but I've checked a lot of waterfalls. And here we have a little skeleton. Rest well, little sketty. And around here somewhere, oh, and here's a cool boar thing. Looks like it would be an enemy, right? But it's friendly. It's just chilling, eating grass. So we won't disturb him. We'll just carry on our way. Up here somewhere there's an entrance to something called the Tangle Root, which is a big cave system sort of thing, half made of rock and half made of just twisting vines and roots and plant matter. So I think that will be a nice little place to visit. We can wander through its shady tunnels. And this river leads all the way down to the ocean, so we'll end up following that eventually all the way back to the city that we saw earlier, the city of Paradise. Look at that. It's pretty attractive. So, I guess I'll start talking about the game a bit. My thoughts on it. This isn't really a full review or anything because, as I said, I'm only 10 hours in. But I feel I have a pretty solid grasp of the game so far. And I'll talk about a few different elements of it. So I've got thoughts on the writing and the gameplay and the enemies. So I guess I'll just start with the enemies first off. They're fairly uninteresting, I would say. Nope. We have a dead soldier there of the Obsidian Empire. But let's not be discouraged. Let's head into the Tangle Root. Sorry, the Strangle Root. It's kind of cool, all the tree roots swirling around everything. The enemy design is not great, in my opinion. There are not too many enemies, that I've encountered so far. There's not a great variety of them. And even when there are, when you encounter an enemy you've never met before, they really just fall into a couple categories. There are the ranged fighters, and they just stand in the back and throw spears at you or shoot arrows at you. And there are the melee fighters, and they like to rush in and, throw melee attacks at you. And then there are the spellcasters.
And the spellcasters are the most interesting enemies, I would say.
Because you have healers, for instance, and the healers in this game are not messing around. They will basically full heal all of their buddies if you leave them alone for a few seconds. So you really have to prioritize attacking the healers. Otherwise it's going to be almost impossible to make progress on other enemies.
And I think that's actually kind of cool. It introduces a strong strategic element like that into the battle, where it changes the battle from just being you just punch the nearest enemy until they're dead and then move on to the next one.
It introduces an element of you have to chase down the healer first, take them out, and then you can deal with everybody else, which is kind of fun. And the other spellcasters I found to be kind of entertaining as well, because their spells can be pretty potent, but they tend to charge them up a lot, and so it gives you, lots of warning if you're paying attention to prepare for whatever spell they're casting.
And here we are at the heart of the Strangleroot. And up ahead, we can see a large, that's cool, the sky blotted out by all the tree branches. Up here we can see a pillar of Audra. Audra is a crystal that acts as a conduit for something called essence.
And essence is, I think it's like life force, kind of, but also like mana for spells.
I think souls are made of essence, or essence is made of souls, or something like that. There's some connection there.
And now we can do a little parkour to hop our way out of this cavern, climb up and out. So the enemy design it's fine, it's just not super interesting. The enemies don't tend to do a lot of unusual or surprising things. As I said, my favorite ones are the spellcasters, because they tend to be the ones that make you think the most.
And there's not a huge variety of enemies. Having played for 10 hours, I've fought spiders, zombies, bears, bandits, skeletons, and phantoms. I think that's pretty much everything. Oh, and of course, Zorips, which are these lizard-like people. We'll see some of them in a bit. Once we travel to the Shattered Coast.
And this is a nice view. I do like this area of Dawnshore. The jagged cliffs and hills.
Very rocky.
All the trees filling in this little valley. But yeah, moving on from the enemies, we'll talk about the combat a little bit. The combat is, in some ways, very interesting, and in some ways, very boring to me. What's boring to me about it is partially, as I said, the enemies. They don't tend to surprise you with unusual abilities or attacks or whatever. But and also, I fought with a sword when I was starting the game. I didn't find that very fun. There are guns and bows that you can use. I didn't find those super fun either. But the part of the combat system that I really like, and it's kind of the biggest thing bringing me back to the game, is the magic system. I switched over from being a melee fighter to being a mage, and it is a lot of fun. I really, really like the mage system that they've built in this game. So basically, you have your spells that you can unlock. All of the spells are in the wizard class tree, and you can unlock spells, and then they get added to your spells bar, and you can cast them at any point if you have enough essence to pay the cost of casting it. But there's also these little books called grimoires, and the grimoires, if you have a spell in the grimoire, you can cast it, even if you haven't unlocked the spell normally. And if you have unlocked the spell, casting it through a grimoire raises the level of the spell by 1. And this is a Zorip camp, by the way. Those little palisade spikes guarding their camp. And the spells are very interesting, and that's what makes the playstyle fun for me, is the variety of spells that they have and how you can chain them together. So I've tried a lot of the spells, and I have kind of different builds that I've made with the various spells. My favorite so far has been a sort of spell sword magic fighter type, which is really fun. There's a spell that lets you summon a... Look at this Zorip art here. I like that. That little figure of the jumping Zorip. There's a spell where you can summon a staff. It's a melee weapon, and you can upgrade it through the melee weapon skill tree. And it also has the additional effect of regenerating your essence, which is your mana, every time you hit an enemy with it. And you can upgrade it more to do cool things like do an area of effect attack that, gives you essence for every enemy that you hit, and so on. And so there are other spells that go along very nicely with that. Like, there are these kind of melee defense spells where you can summon a ring of fire around yourself, or a ring of ice, or a shield. So what I do, and here we have a poor little dead Zorip. Little lizard man. I wish I could have played as one of those. You could only play as an elf or a human in this game, which I found a little lame. It's a fantasy game with all these weird races, and you only let me pick elf or human. And also, it doesn't even give you any bonuses one way or the other. It's basically just a choice of ear. But anyway, so I activate my shield and any of my defensive spells, and then I summon my staff, my melee staff, my magical melee staff. And then I run into combat, and I'm whacking people with it. And because every time I hit them, I'm regenerating my essence, I'm also alternating between swinging my staff and casting my very powerful spells like my fireballs and my lightning orbs and stuff like that. So
It's a very dynamic, fun playstyle where you're in the mix, you're in the melee, you're throwing hands. But you also have very fun, powerful spells, like your fireballs and summoning meteors and doing all sorts of, fun stuff with the spellcasting. So, I have to say, more than anything else, what's keeping me coming back to this game is that system, is the magic and the combat that it allows me to participate in, the play style. And it's too bad because I don't think the rest of the combat is very interesting in general. But this one part of it, this mage playstyle, I find super fun, super engaging. So, it's one of the things that I'm really liking about the game. If it wasn't for that, if I was just running around with a big sword and just tapping RT over and over again to swing my sword, I might not be playing the game anymore. Here we have Tazarak, a Zorip who is friendly. All the other Zorips are quite angry. Although, I don't really know who to blame for that because they seem like intelligent creatures. I mean, they have campsites and, language and stuff. But for some reason, we're just, it's kill on sight between the other races and the Zorips. Maybe if we all shared a language, we could all just get along. I don't want to kill my little lizard friends. They're very cool. And this is a region called the Fractured Coast, by the way. So you can kind of understand why, with all the bridges connecting all these little isolated pillars of land. And that lighthouse is over at Claviger's Landing, the harbor that allows entrance into Paradise. There's Kai again. So, that's kind of my thoughts on the combat. I'm sure there will be more enemy types I meet as I keep playing and probably get a little bit more interesting. But so far, the highlight of it is the mage playstyle for me. Suppose I will also touch on the writing / the storyline, the plot. And I would say it's kind of middle of the road. It's not really drawing me in particularly. To a great degree, it's not a phenomenally written story. But it's not terrible. If you played Obsidian's last game, The Outer Worlds, I played maybe 5 hours of that, if not less, and I really couldn't stand it. I really didn't like the writing style. It was full of humor that I found quite cringe, so I couldn't stick around with it. But this game is not trying to be funny, generally. At least not in that kind of, tipping the hat, winking the eye to the player, like, oh, isn't this a funny moment? It's a little more organic in its humor. So,
it hasn't sent me running because of bad jokes yet. And the characters they're okay. Again, so far, as I'm playing more, I might get a bit more attached, but they're not drawing me in immediately. I'm not in love with the characters yet. Or the writing style in general. But I don't want to make it sound terrible or anything. It's not. It's just kind of serviceable. I would say it's a solid 7 out of 10, maybe a little bit lower, but definitely not a 6 out of 10 or below that. Kind of gets the job done, but it's maybe not going to dazzle you while it does it. Here's the harbor. Paradise is a coastal city, so it has some docks out here. And the premise of the game, which is communicated to you in the opening cutscene, is that you are an envoy of the Emperor of the Adiran Empire, and you have been sent to the living lands here to discover the source of a plague called the Dream Scourge. Look at this little harbor. And there's that lighthouse and Claviger's Landing over there. That's where you land when you start the game. And so you hop on a boat and make your way over to the living lands to figure out what's going on with this plague and hopefully put a stop to it. And at the same time, you are also a unique individual called a godlike, which is a type of person that is blessed by a god, or sort of claimed by a specific god. And part of the mystery of the game is that you don't know which god has claimed you. And so, I think part of the mystery part of the main quest is going to be discovering which god you're affiliated with, why you're a godlike. And being a godlike is a very visually detectable thing. Also, I don't know what's going on in this area, but it's kind of cool. There's just all these random banners hanging around, all these different styles. Oh, you know what it might be? Paradise is supposed to be this, haven of, people, fleeing from everywhere else in the world. No matter what your past is, you can find a home in Paradise. And so maybe all these banners are banners of the various homelands where people immigrated from. I think that's probably what it is. That's kind of a cool bit of visual storytelling, I suppose. A cool bit of lore, world building, that all of these, that the city built by immigrants from all around the world sort of displays all of the various lands and nations that people that built it came from. Okay, that stag guy was just talking to me, but he doesn't seem to be around here anywhere. Just whispering, threatening things to me. So, this is Paradise. It's currently swollen with people because of how many people have come to the living lands. And there's so many people that they had to build a shanty town outside the city. And here's the headquarters of the Adiran Empire in Paradise. And the Adiran Empire marched in here and colonized the city, basically. Sort of put a military garrison in and said, you know, in Paradise is going to abide by Adiran laws now. So this is the ambassador's office. Not a bad office. Big bookshelf. And you can kind of decide how much you choose to represent the Empire as you play. There's lots of dialogue options where you can either kind of stick up for the Empire or throw it under the bus or whatever. And that's actually kind of a cool part of the game, is because you're a godlike, you have very obvious physical features. Like, my character has like roots growing out of his head. And so everybody knows right away that you're a godlike. And everybody has also heard that the new Adiran envoy from the Empire is a godlike. And so, pretty much right away, whenever anybody sees you, they know that you are a representative of the Empire. And it's kind of cool because it just gives your character a what would I say? I mean, people have a prejudice towards you, whether positive or negative. If they see you as a representative of the Empire, then what they think about the Empire they're going to put onto you. And in most cases here, that's a negative association because most people here do not like the Empire. Paradise is a very independent-minded city. And they don't like having the Empire marching around telling them what to do. And on the topic of the writing, I would like to give it props. There is one aspect that I think they have done a pretty good job on, which is the kind of classic thing in an RPG that people like to see, which is making you feel like your choices matter. And this isn't necessarily just in the big moments where, you decide the fate of a nation or whatever. But very frequently in the game, little choices that you make reappear later on. The consequences of that choice reverberate farther on in your journey. I've had a lot of times already where I do something very minor, make a very minor choice that doesn't seem, particularly significant. And then later on I'll encounter something that the world is responding to me based on the choice that I made in big and small ways. Also, we're walking around like a temple district sort of thing now. There's a temple there. I like that little fish statue up above the door. I believe that's a temple to Andra.
sea god.
The architecture of Paradise is kind of cool as well. It has a variety of architectural styles. It feels like they're all kind of smashed together in a sort of eclectic manner, which matches the vibe of the city for sure. But yeah, the world feels very responsive to what I do and the choices that I make. And that's a very important part of an RPG for me. In terms of, the RPG, me enjoying the RPG. Good quests, good writing can definitely carry an RPG alone if the story is good. But it's very, very gratifying to feel like the world is reacting to your choices. There's a Gabe Newell interview, and Gabe Newell, in case you don't know, he is a very major figure in the video game world. He founded Valve, which of course owns Steam, the massive game platform online on, for PCs. And he also, had a hand in creating Valve's games to one degree or another. And when he was talking about Half-Life, the original Half-Life, in an interview that I saw sometime, he was saying that when a player, he was talking about the world reacting to a player. And he said, when a player shoots a wall with their gun, and you don't have the little PNGs or whatever of bullet holes appear on the wall, the player suffers what he called a narcissistic injury. A narcissistic injury. A narcissistic injury. And I thought that was quite interesting and very true, a good way of putting it, and kind of a funny way of putting it, but very true, because really something as simple as that, something as little as when I swing my sword against a wall, it leaves a scrape. When I shoot my assault rifle against the wall, it leaves a bunch of little bullet holes. That is a very micro thing, but it is a message to the player that you are having an impact on the world, that your choices are having an impact on the world, and therefore that your choices are meaningful. And that's a huge part of, games, right? Any game, not just RPGs. There are games where it's more or less important for the player to feel immersed, and for the player to feel like their choices matter. It doesn't necessarily matter as much in a Call of Duty campaign as it does in, Mass Effect or whatever. But, even then I would say still in a Call of Duty campaign, there are moments of choices in the campaigns I remember, and, even getting that ability to choose, do you want to go take out the anti-aircraft battery or the machine gun nest? Just having that choice makes you feel like your choices matter. Even if it's a bit of an illusion, and you have to destroy both anyways, but you just get to choose which one you go to first. Well, the choice is still a choice, right? It's not an illusion, even in that case. Even if you're just choosing which one you do first, The choosing is a choice. The choosing is satisfying. And in this game, I think they do a reasonably good job of making your choices feel significant. For instance, my brother is playing the game as well, and I've just mentioned a few times, like, hey, this character, I made this choice, and then this consequence happened later on. Did that happen to you? And he says, no, nothing like that even happened to me. These are things like, I don't want to spoil anything directly, but like, there's one moment where you have the opportunity to kill a character or not. And if you kill the character, a completely different character in retribution is killed that you would have no way of sort of anticipating or whatever. But because you made the choice, that person died, and if you didn't make the choice, then that person doesn't die. So there's cool things like that, both big and small. But yeah, I would say the writing overall is, and this is kind of funny, this is like a brothel, and these dudes are just like chilling in the pool. Is that what you do in the brothel? The prostitutes are just chilling in the hot tub. Sounds like a good deal to me. Sounds like a relaxing work environment. As we leave, I'm going to not focus on the mosaic on the wall or the painting on the wall, because that might be a TOS violation. I don't know. I don't know how artistic nudity in a game registers with YouTube's censor policies, but probably not well. But here we can look at these nice fish instead. Yeah. And like here in this part of the city, you can see these railings and the lanterns and stuff. It has a sort of Chinese aesthetic. Like it feels like I'm walking through Shanghai or something, vaguely. Whereas other parts of the city feel more like, Mayan temples or something. That's a gorgeous art piece. I love it. Hang it in the Louvre. But yeah, my overall opinion on Avowed at the moment is, and I'm still going to keep playing. I might not finish the game. I don't know. I've been kind of going back and forth. Like, well, I'm sort of enjoying it, but is it good enough to stick around? Right now, to me, it feels like it's sort of forgettable. It's the kind of game that, 5-10 years from now, I'm just going to think, oh yeah, Avowed, that was like that Obsidian fantasy game, right? And it's just not going to leave very much impact. But, not every RPG has to be Disco Elysium or whatever, so it's fine to not make the best game in the world. It's okay. I do wish that it was a bit better. There's parts of it that I wish the combat was more interesting. Besides my mage class, which is the part that I'm finding fun, but I wish the writing was a little more juicy. There's been like one or two side quests that I found kind of interesting, so as I keep playing, I'm expecting that I'll find more little bits and bobs to latch onto. Overall, I think it's a solid, enjoyable game, but also one that, if I stopped playing tomorrow and never picked it up again, I wouldn't really, like, if it was deleted from my life, if I couldn't play it anymore, I wouldn't really shed it here. I'm not, just kind of playing it when I have some time to kill. It's a gorgeous sky. Swirling stars, and big moon off in the distance, all the clouds. Apparently one of the moons in the lore, fell to the earth, I guess. Broke up and fell to pieces. The classic trope of the moon crashing into the planet. I do kind of like walking around at night as well. You start to get all these mushrooms and things that light up. You realize that they're actually bioluminescent. And there are some areas that are just lit up in these multicolored arrays of the mushrooms, and there's a campfire or whatever, and it can get very vibrant even in the dark. Or rather, it can get vibrant specifically when it's dark, because all that stuff disappears when the sun is up. Should I scratch on my beard a bit? Wandering in Avowed and beard scratching. But I heard the Pillars of Eternity games were pretty good. So if anything, maybe after Avowed, I should check those out. Yeah, here, check this out. All these blue and yellow mushrooms. The little glowing red light of the Zorab's campfire. It's gorgeous. The role of fungus in the game is kind of prominent. Your character customization options allow you to have kind of fungal character traits. You can make yourself look like you have these big mushrooms growing on you as part of your godlike appearance. And in the opening cutscene, when you see the dream scourge playing out, it manifests as mushrooms growing on living creatures. So it sort of feels like, this isn't even a spoiler because I don't know, but it felt like from the character creation screen alone, just seeing character creation
And that opening cutscene, it feels like your character's godlike status is probably tied into the Dream Scourge somehow.
And this is kind of a cool thing. This is like a giant creature.
Just its bones buried in the rock and exposed when it seems these two rock faces cleaved apart at some point. It's a lovely shot off at looking down the canyon with the moonlight shining on the river below.
So, I think I've pretty much said all of my thoughts on the game at this point, so there's a lovely little spot very near here. It's on the canyon edge as well,
but it's an old godlike, or not godlike, a godless ruin. It's an old ruin of the godless people.
And I think it'll be nice to end our little walk there.
So we'll take a couple more minutes to walk over to this spot.
Climb up here, climb up here.
We can see more of Paradise over here.
The city is kind of interesting.
It just abuts the wilderness completely. I mean, part of that is just game design, right? You're not able to design a true-to-life representation of what a city would actually look like. And all of its... Man, just look at all those mushrooms. It's very cool. You can't design a region true to life, and so you have to compress it all. But
there's something funny to me about the walls of Paradise just ending right next to a campsite of Zarips or whatever. Like, literally, they could throw a rock at the city's walls. They're so close. But let's travel in here, past these large blue mushrooms. We'll find ourselves at Watcher's Mirror, this old godless ruin.
Covered in bioluminescent fungus and climbing vines, overgrown with trees and foliage.
And down here, a reflecting pool of some kind, with an altar in the center, lily pads growing in the water, and over
here, a set of steps leading up to a bridge that crosses the chasm. Man, look at this fungus. I know I've said it a lot, but it's just gorgeous.
The blue, starry sky. And as we walk out onto this bridge, you can see it's collapsed, no longer passable.
We can see more tail bones of that giant creature.
It looks like a giant Leoplerodon or something.
Although its front claws look maybe like something more terrestrial.
But let's leave it here, my friends. Thanks for stopping by and listening to me ramble a bit about Avowed.
Let me know if you've played it. until next time, let's all take care of ourselves.